I learned that if we are serious about integrating immigrants, we must be intentional about engaging newcomers in leadership positions, in positions of influence. I also learned that integration, and it was touched on this morning, is a word that constitutes an existential threat to many long-term residents. The fear that immigrants will dilute the essential character of America, that immigrants will change America more than America will change immigrants, is as old as this country itself. This sentiment was echoed as far back as the mid-1700s by Benjamin Franklin, who complained that the German immigrants were too plentiful and would, in his words, Germanize us instead of us Anglifying them, as they will never adopt our language and customs. On November 5th, 2013, I learned that for us to truly honor the foundation of this great nation and to live out the promise inscribed on the Statue of Liberty, we have to look at integration from what I call the big I and the little I. Integration with the big I is when we talk about creating legislation, developing policies, institutionalizing integration. But I am here to offer you a new challenge. I am here to ask you to go back into your communities and start looking at integration with a small I. Look at integration as a unique experience between immigrants and long-term residents. Because when this unique exchanges that occur at an interpersonal level can be captured, we have an ability to create a much stronger and sustainable impact over time in this work. This is what truly transforms communities. If you doubt it, look at the history of integration in America. It has not been a shortage of legislation. Integration to me is an unenforceable demand. Government can legislate, put policies that force us to be in the same room like this, but will never force us to get along. It is formed when we truly and genuinely bond and connect and build relationships based on mutual trust. Because the truth is, institutions don't integrate, people do. And people don't integrate because institutions make them integrate. There's something that can never be fully legislated: freedom of association. The government can never force you to associate. They can make policies. Our schools are no more integrated today than they were in the 60s. And the arm of the federal government had been on a lot of communities since the 60s to integrate schools. But look at where we are today. To suggest otherwise, I have come to think, if we don't see integration as a means by which immigrants gain access to the benefits already enjoyed by the majority, to suggest otherwise is to fall victim to a common human fallacy that says when it doesn't work, do it some more. You probably know this, the words of this old classic, that I know an old lady who, by Burl Ives, I guess, I know an old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed the fly. Maybe she'll die. She swallowed a spider to catch the fly. She swallowed a cat, a bird to catch the spider. She swallowed a cat to catch the bird. She swallowed a dog to catch the cat. She swallowed a goat to catch the dog. She swallowed a cow. I don't know how she swallowed the cow. Maybe she'll die. If the fly, ladies and gentlemen, signifies immigrants and long-term residents not getting along, and everything else from the spider onward represents all the legislation and all the policy, we still have to address the fly. But we keep dressing up the fly in unenforceable ways, in unsustainable ways. I actually think we can address the fly if we start looking at integration with a small eye. The connection that Mrs. Sadler, the school principal at this northwestern town, made with me, and her determination to go to bat for me, was not because there was any policy or legislation mandating her to do anything. It's because she connected with me as an individual human being. These connections are happening, ladies and gentlemen, throughout the communities in which you do this work, everywhere. I challenge you to go back and start looking for them and amplifying those circumstances under which these connections are occurring. You will have a far greater impact than hitching your wagon on legislation and policy. I'm not saying they don't have their place, but to genuinely integrate people, you cannot legislatively enforce that. I continue to do this work as an extension of my own journey and my own experience as an immigrant, as well as a professional demand to make sure that communities all across America not only understand that we are a nation of immigrants, but that if we are to maintain this great experiment called America, it's not a nice to do. It is a must do. It's a must-do where we have to stop treating integration as something that occurs on the periphery, but something that is a core strategy for addressing the challenges we face as a nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patience. We have time maybe for a couple questions.
Okay, it was very impressive speech. Thank you so much. There is a conflict between host society and immigrants. We have an experience like you also, and some members of the host society, they are very welcoming. They welcome us, some don't. And also there is a misunderstanding about the cultures of the immigrants. They are not, host society are not understanding, and we as immigrants also we are not understanding the rules, regulations, and culture of the host society. I think because of that, I think we have a gap and we are not fully integrated in the society. In this context, what do you suggest what we need to do as an immigrant, and also what we need to do as a member of the host society?
Okay. Thank you for your question. The question is, how do we facilitate and address issues around the gap of understanding between host communities and immigrant communities? I think some of the conversations that we had in this morning really are geared in addressing that, in the sense that they promote, or they are set up to promote, intergroup contact, right? The more we can generate and create opportunities for intergroup contact between host communities and immigrant communities, we begin to break the walls of those stereotypes and biases that we both carry. Because part of this is facilitating cross-cultural connections. When I made the decision to reach out to the leadership group in Washington State and to express to them why I think I should be given a chance to contribute to the community, I initiated the contact, and as a result, it was reciprocated. But if I had not, there's no telling what could have happened. And I think part of the biggest things we could begin to do is to look for those opportunities where, out of formal, structured, and informal, organic ways, things are happening. And not prioritize one for the other. Because what happens at an informal level is equally powerful and should be harnessed just as much as what's happening that we orchestrate formally.
Yes, Andrew.
I wanted to thank you for Project Shine. The formal structure of Project Shine helped us in Greensboro to help two of the grandmothers in the Montagnard community, which is a very obscure, small community, to become community health workers. And through their work at Project Shine as health literacy workers in their community, they develop these informal connections which have led to other things. So thank you so much for that. Without a formal structure and a great program like Reading Connections, trickling all the way down to Greensboro and then to this little community, we would not have seen this start in this community and all the wonderful things that have happened since. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's great. Gives me great pleasure to hear that.
Lauren. I'm wondering if you can share some very specific examples of where you think there have been successes, and what some of those successes, how they have come about through some of your work, through the small I and the intergroup contact. Can you give us some examples of good models?
And so I think he just shared an example of one of the models that we did here in Greensboro. But there's a great example in even my own city in Philadelphia, where we had a growing community of Nepali and Bhutanese and Burmese community members in town, right, through resettlement, the refugee resettlement community. And we had been, of course, there's always a limitation in terms of resources through the resettlement communities to really help these families get situated and get on their feet, so to speak, because there's always the pressure to get more families quickly and move the others out. We then saw ourselves as an extension of what could be creating kind of a networked effect that continue the work that gets started with by the resettlement agencies. But we didn't really know how to go about doing that. And so we started going around and speaking with the kind of like informal leaders, people who were in the faith community, just going to the community, becoming a trusted face in that community, attending festivals and events, and just getting to know the people, and started seeing who are the people who have some level of influence and talking with them and finding out what's already happening at an organic level. We learned that there have been opportunities where mainstream mothers have been looking for ways to help Bhutanese and Burmese mothers just to understand how to kind of deal with issues around caregiving, right? Because oftentimes the men are the first ones to get a job based on the resettlement requirements, and then the women have to try to get kind of the household settled in and make sure the kids are vaccinated, that they're enrolled in school, and all that, and build a household here in America. And so these suburban moms have been kind of looking for ways to support and help this community, and there have been a lot of informal things happening already, where connections were made to provide English language instruction at a very informal level because someone connected someone to a family and they thought, gee, we could do something to help. And so as we started learning about all these efforts, we said, what would happen if we kind of amplify what's already happening and put some legs on the ground, so to speak, and create a structure that will expand this work, but also allow it to continue to flourish at an organic level. So we formed what became known as a friendship club, right? The friendship club was like a women's club, mom's club, so to speak, between the mothers in the long-term, native-born mothers and Burmese and Bhutanese mothers. And they would come together and they would help these mothers learn how to use a floss and help their kids use a floss and change a baby's diaper. I mean, basic things. How to shop for household cleaning chemicals and really all the kinds of things that you wouldn't even think about, but was absolutely critical in helping these refugee families get settled in. And it became a really huge and valuable project that ended up getting funded by a local foundation in Philadelphia and expanded beyond just the Bhutanese and Burmese community into the Iraqi community. And so that is one example of when I say, look at the little eye as opposed to always the big eye. There's so many people in our communities who are making their own connections, who genuinely want to help, who see the immigrants in our backyards and ask themselves, what can I do? But somehow there is an overwhelming emphasis from all levels of administration to only focus intensely on the legislative and policy part, which I'm not discounting, but I want us to equally as practitioners, don't negate what's happening on the ground.
A couple in Charlotte, our interfaith Mecklenburg Ministries for a number of years had Friday Friends that specifically people would find someone totally unlike themselves in any kind of dimension, including immigrants. And there were certain, for 4 or 6 or however many Fridays, and there was this question that was explored. And so those were the informal connections. And at the museum, we do a lot of cross-cultural programming, specifically we had a bluegrass meets mariachi. I mean, and then you have the groups perform, talk about their own cultural traditions, and then create something together. So, I mean, to your point.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's have one more. Sure.
I just have a quick question on, many times in the host communities or the natives don't know how to do this themselves. You know, they may not have the tools for this. So can you speak from that perspective about the little eye and how you help them go beyond welcoming?
Where I live is a predominantly white community. And I go to church at a Baptist church. And I would always make it a point to bring flyers to the church to let people know that there is a community in Philadelphia that is either the Iraqi community, the Eritrean community, whatever the immigrant community is when I'm doing clothing drive for the winter time or whatever I'm doing to just kind of educate people. Because yes, there are a lot of people who don't know. They would love to be part of this. They just don't have the mechanism to participate in this. And for those of us practitioners, it's really up to us to start recognizing that there are untapped communities and untapped resources out there that would be willing, maybe not unanimously, but we can find people in these communities that will warm up to the idea. And even if it's creating opportunities where you can establish one-on-one connections and relationships just to kind of build the connection, and then and as they have a positive, I believe in word-of-mouth multiplier. I think there's no better marketing tool. And if you can establish and show people how they can have a positive connection with the foreign. One of the things I talk about is really not even necessarily taking a long-term resident and connecting them with someone from Africa like myself, but asking yourself, how are these long-term, maybe white residents are connecting with African Americans? If we can establish those kinds of connections, they can have secondary effects. Because if we truly ask ourselves how many white residents have strong connections and bonds with African American residents or populations, it's not that many in a lot of places, of those that I've been. And so there is something to be said about kind of progressively helping to expand this work and not just kind of leapfrog from the long-term resident who may not necessarily be African American to an immigrant that freshly arrived from an African remote country like me, but to say, hey, let's just look at the composition of everyone else in our immediate neighborhood that happens to also be American. How are we connecting? And once we're able to break the walls or the barriers there, then we can easily transition into other groups. We don't often think in those terms. And that's what I have to remind myself in my own practice.
Thank you so much, Patience.